Dirty Bird podcast contains foul language and is not appropriate for young fledglings. Listener discretion is advised. Our intro music is brought to you by Ricky Pistone, aka Dick Piston. And our outro music is brought to you by the Sidewalk Slammers. Check them out wherever you get your music.
Are you looking for a podcast today with ornithology and humor you crave? Well, I know all these guys and it's birds they like. It's Dirty Bird, yeah, they're just a couple guys who really like birds. It's Dirty Bird, yeah, they're pretty dirty, but they really like birds.
Hello, and welcome to Dirty Bird Podcast, the Thanksgiving Special Edition. I'm Dr. John, and in each episode, I pick an individual bird species and tell you everything you need to know about them. And this episode, I'm going to tell you everything you probably don't need to know about turkeys. You'll learn some great facts to share around the dinner table, like how you have conquistadors to thank for your Thanksgiving meal, and what a baby turkey is called. And also we'll be disproving some very common facts shared around the facts, in quotes, shared around the Thanksgiving table every single year, I feel like. I've been meaning to do this episode for a really long time. Lots of people have suggested I do a Thanksgiving episode on turkeys. It's been kind of daunting because, as we'll see, turkeys, like chickens, are really well-studied birds, so there's just a ton of information out there on them. I definitely had to pick and choose what to put in this episode, so if you're a big turkey fan out there and I missed your favorite turkey fact, I'm sorry. Write in and tell me what I missed. Just to illustrate how intensively researched turkeys are, I found papers detailing out their cardiac function on EKGs and even their sleep patterns using EEG machines. I mean, it was insane. Like, the information I had to sift through to be like, all right, what is like the most interesting, most relevant, like how can I present, a full life history and interesting facts on turkeys without like going into, the flipped P waves on their EKGs and stuff and what their sleep patterns are like. I don't know. Some people out there might be like, man, I really wanted to know about the sleep pattern of turkeys. What the hell? I also am not going to be going into detail about the nuances of turkey hunting and not a ton about like domestic turkey. I will talk about domestic turkeys, but like not a ton into their, farming and everything like that. There's tons of other information out there, tons of other podcasts that talk about turkey hunting or raising turkeys on your farm, things like that. So, check that out if you're so inclined. And also, I will reiterate, while I love birds, I'm definitely not against hunting them in a responsible way. Hunters help out turkey conservation a ton, as we'll see. Also, I think if you talk to any turkey hunter, you will hear just how much they respect these wily and notoriously difficult to hunt birds. I'm recording today from Holly River State Park, West Virginia's second largest state park. It's full winter here. It's a sunny, nice day. It's like in the upper 50s, sun shining, but there are absolutely no leaves on the trees. I hiked up a little trail to get here, and to call it a trail was pretty generous because it's pretty much just straight up the mountain, and the leaves are covering it. You'll probably hear some wind. There's kind of a little bit of wind ripping through these trees now that there's no leaves to block anything. I'm doing my best to stay out of the wind, but I'm sorry for that little bit of wind noise. But I heard some kinglets when I was hiking up here, heard a very angry red-bellied woodpecker. I did see some two bucks kind of chasing each other and fighting it out, and there was a doe nearby, checking out who the winner is. As we talk about, male turkeys and their competition for females, that, that might have been a pretty relevant sight to see. but I also want to bring you this month's episode's Birdwatch. Birdwatch is a new segment I recently introduced where listeners will tell me about their cool bird experiences, and I'll play them on the show. Last episode we had Jay Pogo, and this episode I'm excited to have a story from Cass. Cass is a good friend of the show, featured on one of my Icelandic bird episodes. So without further ado, here's Cass.
What's up, dirty birds? This is Cass. How's it going? Been a minute. How are you, Dr. John? Wanted to send this in for the Birdwatch thingy. Birdwatch. The other day. It was a couple months ago now. But it was a pretty neat experience. Saw my first American woodcock. And when I say saw, I really mean heard and saw in very dim light. I saw its like mating ritual thing, which was amazing. It was, I guess it was earlier this year, and I was just walking my dog out on this trail down by the river, and then it kind of comes out into some fields. It's really wooded, and then it comes out into fields, which is right where American woodcocks do their mating ritual, which I didn't know about, actually. It's hilarious because your episode on woodcocks came out like a few weeks later, I'm pretty sure. And so I was like, oh my god, what perfect timing. But yeah, the woodcock is just in the field, and it's almost dark, and I just hear wah, that classic like wah, meh, meh, wah, or whatever it is. Super crazy noise. And I was like, what the hell is this bird? Is just like whapping in the field. And I was like, okay. But then it does its like aerial thing, which is hilarious because it's just like, it's just like making, or it kind of sounded like, it reminded me of like, Rogers. It's just like doing circles all over the field and lands back down in the middle of the field. And it's like, wah. Yeah, hilarious. So, yeah, it just seems like the woodcock's having a lot of fun, which is a great move, honestly. I guess the ladies love the fun, so if you're the one having the most fun, the ladies want to hang. So make sure you're having the most fun. Anyway, that was my bird watch.
Thanks so much for that Birdwatch. I love Timberdoodles too. Remember, y'all can send a voice memo either on Instagram at Dirty Bird Podcast or by email dirtybirdpodcast@gmail.com to have your cool birding experience shared with the Dirty Bird world. And real quick, I can't help sharing a birdwatch of my own. I was recently in Washington, and it is so awesome seeing the red-shafted northern flickers out there. I do a whole episode on northern flickers. Out east here, we have the golden shafted ones, which, I like seeing them, but I'm kind of like, yeah, I've seen them. And then I see the red shafted out west, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. And everyone out west is like, yeah, they're red, so what? And then, they come out east, they're like, oh my God, the gold. So that's just always so cool when you switch coasts and the birds are a little different. It's like, being in a whole new world, and birds that are real common out there, you're just like, oh my God. And finally, before we talk turkey, before we totally dive into the episode, I do want to disprove one turkey false fact that I feel like you hear at every single Thanksgiving. Some uncle brings up, well, Benjamin Franklin wanted the turkey to be the national bird, not the bald eagle. Well, you tell Uncle Barney that is false. I've heard this so many times. It's a super common misconception. It all stems from a personal letter that Franklin wrote to his daughter, where he criticized the bald eagle being used on the design for the seal of America. And Ben Franklin seems to, be mostly joking here in this letter. Like, if you've read Poor Richard's Almanac, Benjamin Franklin was always doing wisecracks, always tongue-in-cheek with almost everything he said. He's mostly just trying to kind of make his daughter laugh here. He writes, the bald eagle is a bird of bad moral character, and compares it to the turkey when he writes, a much more respectable bird, and withal a true original native of America. He is besides, though, a little vain and silly, a bird of courage, and would not hesitate to attack a grenadier of the British Guards who should presume to invade his farmyard with a red coat on. So, you see by that quote, he never does endorse the turkey as a national bird. He doesn't say it should replace the bald eagle. He just kind of, rants against the bald eagle a little bit, and he also does disparage the turkey too. But I guess he's saying the turkey is a little bit more like representative of the Minutemen of the American Revolution, where they're a little vain and like think a lot of themselves, and even though they're just a farmer with a musket, if a redcoat walks into their cornfield, they're going to shoot at him. After doing my bald eagle episode, I do kind of think the bald eagle represents America a little more. Just listen to that episode if you want to hear the good and bad reasons why I think so. Just to describe the turkey a bit, I mean, they're pretty unmistakable birds. I know you guys have seen plenty of pictures of turkeys. They are large, about the size of a Canada goose, but unlike the goose kind of squat on its little webbed feet, turkeys sit pretty high up on long legs. Both males and females have featherless heads, with the males having some quite impressive fleshy head and neck parts, which I'll talk about in a second. There's significant sexual dimorphism between the males and females. Females have pretty bland plumage to help them blend in with their woodland environment. They're covered with mostly brown feathers with some white spotting occurring on the wings and tail. The male turkey, as most people know, is really well defined by that magnificent tail, which they hold in a fan shape, similar to the way a male peacock displays its tail. The male's tail feathers have some beautiful barring patterns of black, white, dark brown, and light brown. The male's wings also have much more distinctive white and black barring patterns compared to the female's. And while at first glance the feathers on the male's back and chest may appear to be just brown or black, they actually have an amazing iridescent shine to them that is absolutely beautiful in the right light. I've talked about how bird eyes differ from human eyes on the show before. It's likely that they can see this iridescence much more than us humans can, and male turkeys probably look like holographic Pokemon cards to them. And as we'll talk about, there's 6 different subspecies of wild turkey, and there's a lot of different color variations between them. I'm going to mention those subspecies later on, but I won't go into painstaking detail on all their differences. The turkey you are eating for Thanksgiving, however, probably did not have these colored feathers, though, because domestic turkeys are bred to have white feathers, so that when they are plucked, the carcass looks nice and uniformly pink. The pin feathers from the more naturally colored turkey feathers leave behind an unsightly brown dot pattern. There are domestic turkey breeds that do have more kind of natural coloring, not just that white, but pretty much the turkeys that we eat that you buy in stores are going to be the white feathered ones. And since I brought up the turkey on your table, let me just mention this one study I found that compared the juiciness, tenderness, nutritional content, and overall consumer satisfaction with free-range turkeys versus turkeys raised in confined conditions. While confined turkeys were more tender, the free-range turkeys, particularly the thigh meat of the free-range turkeys, was preferred by consumers and actually contained a slightly higher protein content than the confined raised turkeys. And I guess while I'm talking about turkeys as food, let me also mention the whole light meat, dark meat thing, because there's always tons of old wives' tales about it. Meat on turkeys is white or dark depending on the myoglobin content in it. Myoglobin is basically the hemoglobin of muscle tissue, bringing oxygen to muscles. So muscles that do more work, like the thighs, tend to have more myoglobin than tissues that don't do much work, like the breast. Because white meat is less active, it has fewer fat stores, leading people to say that white meat is healthier than dark meat because it has fewer calories. But you'll notice when your Uncle Barney, I guess we're calling him, when he says this fact with conviction, white meat is a healthier meat, he's also always loading up his Thanksgiving plate with gravy and pie. The calorie difference between white meat and dark meat is negligible compared to everything else we eat at Thanksgiving. And also the natural unsaturated fats and myoglobin content in the dark meat contain important micronutrients like iron. If you're lucky enough to eat a wild harvested turkey on Thanksgiving, you don't have to worry about white meat and dark meat because pretty much the whole entire bird is dark meat, because in the wild, no muscle is spared from doing the work of survival, and so all the muscle has high myoglobin concentration. So now that we've talked about food, let's totally ruin your appetite by talking about some of those weird bulges and fleshy strips on a male turkey's face and neck. While these may disgust you, hopefully it also makes you laugh because they have some hilarious names. Definitely look at a picture of a male turkey, especially wild male turkeys, what their heads look like, because you'll be able to correlate these weird fleshy bumps and strings and everything. So you'll notice male turkeys have this fleshy part on the front of their neck that sort of looks like a ball sack, honestly. It kind of hangs down right on the front of their neck and wiggles there. This is called a major caruncle. The major caruncle hangs off of a longer, thinner skin flap on the front of the neck called the wattle. It literally looks like a flesh-made sail. Turkeys also have a bunch of other bulbous caruncles on the back of their neck. And you'll also notice that they have this red, fleshy, stringy thing that hangs down from the top of their beak, starting just below their eye, and then hangs down like off of their beak. It looks really annoying, like it would always be in their field of vision and just flopping around. This fancy little thing is called a snood. The red coloration of many of the fleshy protuberances on male turkeys, including their snood, is not due to pigments, but actually due to shallow blood vessels. They do have some blues and purples in their skin color. These are actually from pigments called carotenoids. Male turkeys also have a patch of dark feathers on their breast that is termed the beard. And apparently females can have this, dark feather patch too on their breast. So there are bearded female turkeys also. Kind of makes me think of, dwarves in Lord of the Rings. Dwarf women in Lord of the Rings have beards. Well, apparently not in the Rings of Power version, but, whatever. That's, not canon in my mind. Just heard a raven. Cool. Yep. It kind of pisses me off because my last episode on ravens, I went to a spot I had heard ravens before and didn't hear a single raven during that raven episode, but I guess they decided to show up for the turkey episode. There's absolutely no way we're going to hear any turkeys on the show today. One, we're outside of the gobbling season, and two, they are very shy birds. So what are the wattles, snoods, and caruncles for on turkeys? Wattles, snoods, and caruncles. It sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. So similar structures to these are seen on other Galliformes birds. Galliformes are like the family that turkeys are part of. They're all like ground birds. Chickens are in this. Think of the comb on a rooster. It's similar to the snood on the turkey. So really, these structures are ornamental and part of mate attraction. As I mentioned in my chicken episode, female junglefowl, the ancestors of chicken, preferentially mate with males with bigger and redder combs. Similar experiments have been performed with grouse, ptarmigans, and pheasants. The featherless, fleshy structures on the males of this species seem to correlate with body fitness and to help attract mates. They also may be used for heat dissipation and temperature control. As I mentioned in my vulture episode, birds are pretty good at staying warm in cold environments, but have a hard time with heat dissipation. So, having featherless areas with big blood vessels underneath may be advantageous to dissipate heat. One last comment on these fleshy appendages, and this is probably the grossest one. The snood on the tom turkey, that's the male, that fleshy, stringy thing I mentioned coming off just below his eye and hanging around his beak and flopping all around, it can become erect. And unfortunately, I will talk about that erect snood more in the show. Males also have a tibiotarsal spur. Basically, this is like a velociraptor claw on the back of their leg. It's not just for decoration. Like in roosters, males would compete and fight, sometimes to the death, over females and will use this tibiotarsal spur. Turkeys are really shy birds, and so they're really hard to observe up close. Most of the time when you see them, they're running or flying away from you. They're very good at camouflaging themselves in tree branches to avoid being seen. And I did say run. A lot of times they won't fly. You'll see them running away from you. This makes me think of my buddy Ricky, who does the intro music to the show. Him and I in Boy Scouts one time were in the woods, and there was a whole group of turkeys, and I remember us just being idiots, like, get the turkeys, and we're chasing after them. Oh my God, those turkeys outran us easily. They've been clocked running up to 25 miles per hour, so there was no way that us idiots were going to catch those turkeys. So as you heard, I called the male turkeys toms. So that's in the U.S., we call male turkeys toms. In the UK and Europe, though, they're called stags. Females are called hens. And turkey babies, their chicks, are actually called poults, or my other personal favorite, turkeylings. I love that, turkeyling. But poults are what you usually see. The common name turkey in English actually comes from a mix-up with pheasants and peacocks, which were imported into Europe via the country of Turkey. So when turkeys started showing up, people, thought that they were related to pheasants and peacocks and that they were coming, also via Turkey. And so I don't know, they just got called turkeys. People were pretty lazy with their names back then. The scientific name for turkeys is Meleagris gallopavo. Meleagris is the ancient Greek word for guinea fowl. So again, turkeys are getting, lumped in with another bird that they're not. Guinea fowls are a wild and domestic ground-dwelling bird from Africa. They look pretty similar to turkeys, so I don't know, I guess that's why they got this genus name. Gallopavo, again, it's them getting mashed up with two other birds. Literally, gallopavo, gallus means chicken, and pavo means peacock. So it's Latin for chicken peacock. I'll touch upon why they got this mashed up Latin name a little bit later. The wild turkey's native range encompasses a large area from southern Canada down to southern Mexico. Their northern range is largely restricted by snow cover. As we'll talk about, these are ground-feeding birds, and if deep snow remains on the ground throughout the winter, turkeys can't survive in that area. 30 centimeters of snow depth seems to be the cutoff for them. I'll talk about turkey domestication in a moment, and how it very quickly spread across the world. Within its wild range, it is largely found in mature hardwood forests, although I'll talk about a few subspecies that have adapted to slightly different terrain. They rely on trees and large shrubs to roost in and flee from predators because their large body size makes them capable of only short-distance flights. I did see that a turkey was once clocked at flying an entire mile, but this is exceedingly rare. Normally, they will only fly a few hundred feet max before stopping. While their flights are short, they are powerful and fast, with turkeys being clocked at flying at speeds up to 55 miles per hour. They aren't only found in forests, though. They exploit a large variety of landscapes, such as fields, agricultural land, and shrubland. And while forests, certainly provide a important part of their habitat, they really do kind of rely on a mixed landscape that's broken up by some shrubland, some open kind of pasture land, some early successional forest, as we'll talk about, is particularly important too when it comes to breeding. Their territory sizes can vary widely depending on how dense the food availability is. A study conducted in Missouri in 1990 radio-tagged turkeys and found territory sizes ranging from 365 to 2,300 hectares. That's 900 to 5,500 acres. And this isn't strict territory. It's not like there's just one turkey, holding down 5,000 acres. They're not the only turkey within this area. It just kind of shows how much room they need to roam in order to survive. Turkeys are non-migratory, but will sometimes travel to new locations during the winter if their summer grounds don't have enough food. One turkey was radio collared traveling 5 kilometers away from its summer ground to winter territory. One last note on their habitat, one way to more easily find a turkey in the wild is to recognize an area where they will perform dust baths. Dust baths are many birds' version of bird baths, where they will use a favorite sandy spot to roll in and dislodge loose feathers, remove excess oil and grime, and maybe even also remove ectoparasites. If you find a sandy depression in the woods, chances are it's a wild turkey bathtub. So let's talk about turkey domestication. Let's talk about that turkey you're eating for Thanksgiving. While turkeys are found throughout a wide area of North America, it appears they were only truly domesticated by the Pueblo people of America's southwest and Mexico's northwest. Mitochondrial DNA has found 2 distinctive haplotypes among these early domesticated turkeys, hinting at 2 separate domestication events. It's estimated the domestication occurred between 700 BCA and 200 BCA. So as far back as, 3,000 years ago. These turkeys show evidence of being fed largely maize diets. While also there were turkeys, that were more free range and, ate insects and stuff too, but definitely were supplemented by maize. And then there were turkeys that were just entirely fed maize and kept in pens. In addition to meat and eggs, the domesticated turkeys provided pigments for creating paints, feathers for ceremonial purposes and blanket production, and bones for production of instruments like flutes and whistles, and also a variety of bone tools. There have even been domesticated turkey bones found with healed fractures, indicating that birds with broken bones were given veterinary care by their Native American owners. The domestication of turkeys appears to be pretty widespread among the peoples of the Southwest and on a large scale. Excavations of cliff dwellings in the Mesa Verde region of Colorado found a turkey pen that had turkey droppings 13 meters wide, 40 meters long, and 2 meters deep. That's a lot of turkey shit. So that came from a lot of turkeys. Turkey domestication among Native Americans ran a large gamut of intensity. Some cultures just sort of herded turkeys or had free... God, go away. Ugh. These yellow jackets really want to be on the podcast. Some cultures just sort of herded turkeys or had free-range turkeys. Some just tethered their turkeys like a dog on a leash. Others had elaborate turkey pens made out of wicker, adobe, or even carved into stone. Different Native American cultures may have also used domestic turkeys differently. Some records indicate that domesticated turkeys were never used for food, but only for ceremonial purposes, while wild turkeys were still hunted for food. There are very few native domesticated animals in the Americas. Llamas, alpacas, and Muscovy ducks are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. And then dogs, too, but those are probably domesticated in Asia and brought over with Native Americans when they settled America. So obviously this domesticated turkey would have been quickly recognized as an important resource by other cultures. There's evidence that trade occurred with the Mayas of Central America, as bones of American turkeys have been found at a site called El Mirador in Guatemala, dating between 300 BCA and 100 CA. The American turkey is not found in the wild here, so these bones likely came from trade of domesticated turkeys. Further evidence that these were domesticated and not wild-caught turkeys is that the bones come from a range of turkey sexes and ages, everything from sexually mature males to young flightless poults. The turkey was brought to Europe very shortly after European contact. The first reliable written account of a turkey in Europe dates from 1511 in Spain, and by 1541 turkeys were being imported to England. It's unclear whether these were wild, semi-domesticated, or fully domesticated turkeys. However, a white turkey feather dating from the 16th century in Italy confirms that by the later half of the 1500s, fully domesticated turkeys were in Europe. By 1571, flocks of turkeys were being raised in the Rhineland of Germany. Turkeys were known as the bird of the rich and were served at royal banquets, such as the 1578 marriage banquet of Wilhelm of Rosenberg, heir to the Polish throne, and Anna of Baden, where as many as 600 turkeys were served. Prior to the introduction of turkeys, peacocks were the preferred ostentatious banquet bird, but it appears that turkeys tasted better, and as they replaced peacocks on the table, they were called chicken peacocks, hence the Latin name Gallo pavo of their species name that I mentioned earlier. They were also called Indian cocks. I'm just going to leave that one be. Just like with chickens, there are different types of domestic breeds of turkeys. I found about 10 in total, and just because I like their names, let me read them out. There's the broad-breasted white, which is the most common breed because it's the most consumed. There's also a broad-breasted bronze, the standard bronze, the bourbon red, the blue slate, the Norfolk black, the Narragansett turkey, the chocolate, the Beltsville small white, and finally last, and I guess actually least, by size at least, is the midget white. There's a whole ethical aspect to industrial farmed animals. I sort of avoided this in my chicken episode, and I think I will here too. But one thing I do want to mention is their farts. Oh, and right on cue when I say farts, there is a mixed flock coming through. I just heard some chickadees. Oh, and that was a hairy woodpecker. So classically, we think of cows when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. The methane of cow farts is a notoriously potent greenhouse gas. However, poultry farm farts have been largely ignored because it's assumed that they don't produce much methane since they don't eat, a lot of fiber in their diets compared to cows that, are munching on like hay. However, I found a study out of Zurich in 2020 that found turkeys and geese actually produce methane comparable to non-ruminant animals of similar size. So turkey farts might be an overlooked source of greenhouse gas. And I don't know. I told you there were some really weird turkey studies out there. Shit, fuck you. So I just got stung by a yellow jacket right on my finger. The things I do to bring you this podcast. But anyway, let's talk about wild turkey breeding. During winter, turkeys form flocks based on sex, with males hanging out together and females hanging out with other females. Oh. This mixed flock has actually provided me with a good little show. I think they feel bad for me since I got stung by that yellow jacket, and so they're coming right by the podcast to lend some little bird sounds. During the winter, turkeys are in separate flocks, males and females in flocks together. But as the winter ends, these flocks begin to break up, and the courtship begins. Males gobble to attract females to them. These gobbles are pretty loud and can be heard up to 1.5 kilometers away. Males will perform these gobbles in or near a forest clearing or open field because once a female is lured in by a male gobble, he will perform a display for them by puffing out his feathers to reveal the shiny iridescence, drooping his wings to display those awesome feathers, fanning out his tail to display those awesome banded patterns, and then he struts around. He emits gobbles and a variety of other calls while he does his courtship display. And he will also make that snood nice and erect. Remember, I told you I'd bring that snood back. Ladies love a stiff snood. These chickadees love a stiff snood. They're calling. Male turkey will also puff up the feathers of their beard. That's that patch of dark feathers on their chest. God, these bird sounds are awesome. This is probably the best wild bird recording I've had in a while with the podcast, This mixed flock really likes me. They're probably like, who's this crazy asshole sitting in the woods surrounded by yellow jackets? Male turkeys are polygynous. They will mate with multiple females, usually around 4 to 5. These hens form a harem around the dominant male turkey. The hens are really eyeing the skin on the tom's skull cap and also the length of his snood. Studies have shown that a larger skull cap and longer snood on males are positively correlated with sexual selection by hens. It's not only females that the male is attracting, he may also be attracting other males looking to fight for his harem hens. As usual with animal fights, the best strategy is to avoid physical fighting altogether and instead intimidate your opponent with displays of how loud you can gobble, how big your tail and chest are. If displaying doesn't work though, toms will progress to wing attacks, flapping towards each other and striking each other with their wingtips. They will also stand breast to breast and peck at each other and neck wrestle. Yep, that's right. Sort of like an arm wrestle, but instead they will just wrap their necks around each other, with the goal being to sort of wrap your opponent's head around your neck so you can peck him and assert dominance. Finally, they also have those tibiotarsal spurs, similar to a rooster's spurs, that they can inflict sometimes lethal damage with. Toms will fly at each other with spurs extended out, slamming into their opponent's head, neck, or breast. Sometimes one tom will even mount the other one to deliver attacks to its back. And these fights are made sort of more intense because there's usually an audience of hens watching. I have a cool story about this. So I was camping on Johns Creek near Newcastle, Virginia, with some friends. And early in the morning, I woke up and I could hear, the gobbling. And so I sneak out of my tent and literally, I'm crawling on the ground. And it's misty out, and I can see in the field near where we're camping, there is just, I swear to God, it was like a circle of hens. Like it must have been like 10 hens, like forming like a fight circle. And in the middle of the circle was two tom turkeys. And they are just like, to me, you know, I didn't see any accounts of this, but like it looked like they were like had their wings spread out, and they were kind of like almost like doing a dance, like facing off, and then they were going at each other, and the breeze was blowing towards me. So that's probably why the turkeys didn't like hear me, because they also have really good eyesight. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. That's why they are such shy birds, is they have really good eyesight, so they'll see people. I was kind of staying low to the ground. I think the mist was helping, and then the wind was blowing towards me, so they couldn't hear me or smell me. I didn't see anything in my research about their sense of smell. But anyway, so feathers, when they were fighting, you know, they would be ripping feathers off of each other, and their feathers would actually be drifting in the wind towards me. It was so cool. But of course, like I was like, I want my binoculars, and you know, so I kind of like started getting my binoculars out of my pack, and they saw me, and immediately the guys were like, all right, you know, we're cool for now. Let's get away from this person. And all the turkeys just took off, and just kind of in a very like orderly fashion, like, you know, just, they weren't really running. They were kind of doing a little fast turkey trotted across Johns Creek and went up into the woods, the mountainside. But I was very thankful for the experience I got watching that, the Turkey Fight Club. So I think this is my last snood fact. I'll stop talking about the erect snood. But those long snoods are just not for attracting females. They are also an indicator of how good of a warrior the turkey tom is. Studies have shown that longer snooded males are more often victors in combat, and shorter snooded males fight with less intensity. It does make sense. I mean, it takes a lot of energy to engorge those snoods with blood and make the carotenoids and proteins that broaden up your skull cap and caruncles and everything, or carbuncles, whatever it was. So fitter males will have more elaborate ornamental displays. Really, after mating, the male's part is done, and the female does all the work of breeding from there. She builds the nest, she incubates the eggs, she raises the young. The poults, the turkeylings. It appears in most areas. Peak female nesting begins in late April. So a little bit earlier in April is when a lot of those peak courtship displays and gobbling is going to be going on by the male. Hens nest in areas with undergrowth just tall enough to conceal their nest, but not so tall that the hen can't watch out for predators. They will try to conceal their nest under a fallen log or bush if they can. Their nest isn't much. It's just a depression in the leaves. Females will lay anywhere from 4 to 17 eggs, but usually average 9 to 11 eggs. A side note, I found another weird study. It tested the breaking strength of turkey eggs. I told you there's so many weird studies out there about turkeys. It found that turkey eggs had a higher breaking strength than chicken or duck eggs, but were less strong than goose eggs. So, yeah, do whatever you want with that information. If a turkey nest fails, and as we'll talk about, a lot of them do, they will attempt to rebrood. There's a lot of research into what makes turkey nests successful or not. Some of it gets very contradictory. In one study I read, seasoned adults appear to be more successful than juveniles. Another one I read, early nesters were more successful than late nesters. But then I would find another paper that would find no difference or the opposite result. So, I mean, it might just vary from region, or, you know, maybe just very hit or miss. Turkey hens will incubate their nest for about a month before hatching. A month is a really long time, especially, you know, these ground nesting birds are very vulnerable. But this long incubation time is because they need to be well developed upon hatching. Turkey chicks, poults or turkeylings, like a lot of ground nesting birds, they are born precochial, meaning pretty much right after birth they can walk and peck and do feeding for themselves. Within hours of hatching, the poults can walk and travel at a pace of 200 meters an hour. The mother begins taking the little ones trekking through the world, utilizing a variety of landscapes, such as hardwood stands, pine stands, agricultural plots, and early successional areas to find food while avoiding predators. However, early successional seems to be preferred as it offers the most concealment from predators. Specifically, they are trying to find insects to eat because the poults require a protein-rich diet in order to grow their feathers and body size. For at least the first 3 days, they return to the nesting site each night so that the mother can brood the poults, since their feathers are still too underdeveloped to thermoregulate themselves. They still require brooding after those first 3 days, but they use other sites other than the original nesting site. For the first 2 weeks after hatching, the poults are mostly flightless and are extremely vulnerable to predators. However, once they can fly at around 2 to 3 weeks, they begin roosting in trees with their mother to avoid danger. And even before that, they can do some wing-assisted jumping that allows them to roost in shrubs and perform short flights to avoid predators. Got some Carolina wrens singing. During these first few weeks, it's really important the mother chooses a nesting site that has good food nearby, because studies have shown the farther away from the nest the mother needs to move with the brood in search of food during this early period, the first couple weeks, and especially during those first 3 days, the higher the risk of predation and brood failure. The young really do need to eat a lot because they're growing really fast, as much as 17 grams a day. By day 4, they double in mass, and then they double in mass again a week later. Female turkeys have been known to have 2 successful double broods in a reproductive season. Although given the high mortality rate of their nests, this is pretty rare. In a study conducted between 2014 and 2019 in Georgia and Louisiana, out of 408 female turkeys studied, only 3 had successful double broods. Sometimes several turkey moms and their poults will team up and form a large flock together. Once the summer is over and winter approaches, it's time for the now juvenile male turkeys to leave mom and form up their own winter bachelor flocks. While the hen turkeys, the female turkeys, will stick together with their moms and form these girl group flocks. Winter turkey flocks can be huge, up to 200 turkeys. And I think I failed to mention it earlier, but these winter flocks are actually where a lot of the hierarchy and dominant structure gets made. The hens actually have their own pecking order, kind of similar to chickens, where there's a pecking order with all the hens. There's like kind of a dominant female, and she pecks down on all the other ones. The turkey hens seem to have a similar dominance hierarchy, but it's especially true with the males. And it appears during the winter in these group flocks, the males form their own hierarchy. And so even by the time that spring has rolled around and they start, gobbling and forming their harems, pretty much the dominant structure is like already played out. Like the turkeys know which ones are the more dominant and everything like that. And this is probably good evolutionary strategy. It seeks to avoid as much combat as possible. If you're a turkey and you already know that you're pretty low on the totem pole during the winter, when you're hanging out in the bro turkey group, you're not going to go challenging a bunch of male turkeys. That's just going to result in you getting hurt. But if you realize you're a little higher up on the winter one, then you may be able to assert your dominance a bit more come springtime. So it's really cool. The wintertime, they're not just trying to survive the winter. They're also forming these distinct dominance hierarchies within their flocks that go up to 200 turkeys, and each one knows they're standing. So that's turkey breeding. Let's talk about turkey feeding. They mostly eat plant matter such as berries, seeds, and leaves. Mast, meaning the seeds of deciduous trees like acorns, are an important food source for turkeys. Similar to deer, like you'll hear, especially hunters, talk about, it was a good mast year. There was lots of rain or something, so there were lots of acorns. And so this will help support the turkey and the deer populations. Going into winter, they'll be able to fatten up pretty well. Versus, some years it's not a good mast year, and those animals suffer. Turkeys also eat bugs too. I did say the poults, really needed the bugs, but adults will eat bugs too. Grasshoppers and snails seem to be a big favorite. And they are occasionally known to eat amphibians like frogs and salamanders. And I even saw reports that they'll eat small mammals too if they happen to catch a vole or a mouse. They feed mostly by scratching at the leaf litter on the ground to reveal food items. They also will sometimes feed by perching in a tree or a shrub and eating berries directly off branches. Like grouse, they will also eat leaf buds off of trees, particularly during times when the snow covers the ground. And they will eat mosses and fern fronds. The intestines of turkeys, as with largely all seed and grain-eating galliforms, are specially designed for their high-fiber diets. They have two-paired cecum. The cecum is basically a pouch at the attachment of the large intestines and the small intestine. Us humans only have one, but in turkeys there are two of these pouches that aid in digestion and absorption of liquids and cellulose, the sugar that makes up plant cell walls. And like a lot of birds, turkeys will ingest small rocks and sand to help them digest this fibrous diet. They store this in the gizzards, which is kind of like part of the stomach to grind up food. Since, they don't have teeth, they don't chew. So we already mentioned one of the important sounds that turkeys make that everyone knows, the gobble. A little bit more about that gobble. So like I said earlier, it's done by the male, the tom turkey, to attract hens. The gobbles peak in the early spring, usually April, and like songbird singing, the male will gobble more in the morning. Often these morning gobbles are performed from a roost perch in a tree so the male can maximize the distance his gobble travels. The gobbles also serve as territorial calls for males to maintain their dominance hierarchy. The males also make a variety of sounds during courtship, during that kind of courtship display I talked about, specifically a chump and hum sound and a sneeze sound. Both males and females will give a cackle call when returning back to the ground from roosts in trees. When in flocks, they will give cooing or purring contact calls. And finally, they also give a yelp call to help reassemble a flock after it's been dispersed. So that mixed flock kind of moved on, but now there's a chipmunk, pissed off chipmunk, giving some calls. All right, so now I'll move into the later part of the show where I talk about the population of turkeys, threats to them, diseases, that kind of stuff, and then end with evolution as always. And y'all want to stick around. The evolution section of wild turkeys is pretty fucking cool. So wild turkeys, like a lot of animals that depend on mature forest, suffered steep population declines across their range with European colonization, as forests were cleared for agriculture and any remaining wild turkeys were excessively hunted, leading to many wild turkey populations becoming locally extirpated. However, as more farmland reverted back to forest, specifically in the late 1800s, early 1900s, their populations began to rebound in the 20th century. Also, reintroduction programs of wild turkeys to areas where they have been locally extirpated have been really successful. And this largely took place starting in the 1950s. A note on this, these reintroduction programs are only successful if wild-caught turkeys are relocated. Domestic turkeys, even the breeds that look a lot like wild turkeys and are free range and everything like that, they do not survive in the wild. There's been programs that attempted to release domestic turkeys or even turkeys that were more recently descended from wild turkeys but human raised. They just didn't work out. It appears that, wild turkeys, there's like a period of learning they do early on, when they're born in the woods with their mother and everything like that, where they learn these survival skills that just domestic turkeys, they don't have. And so they're quickly eaten by predators if they don't have these skills. Turkeys today seem to be doing so well that some people even estimate that there are more wild turkeys today than in pre-colonial times. I hear this claim with deer too. I find it, hard to believe. There's way less forest than there was pre-colonial times. And yes, I know the Native Americans were hunting them and the Native Americans were competing with them for, acorns and stuff like that. But I don't buy it. Current breeding population is estimated around 6.9 million. A major reason why they have such an intense recovery effort done in the 1950s specifically was their hunting popularity. Just like when I talked about the ruffed grouse, hunters really are, ironically, some of the major protectors of these birds. The hunting industry around turkeys is also a huge economic boon to areas with turkey populations. In 2003, the spring turkey season was estimated to bring in $1.8 billion in the U.S. Turkeys are the second most popular game animal after deer, and an estimated 2.5 million hunters pursue turkeys each season. I mean, so that just reiterates, I am not against responsible hunting at all, because really hunters, I'm a fisherman too. I have really not hunted much. My dad hunts. If he's listening, shout out Dad. Hi. He turkey hunts too. But they are the ones that are really paying to protect these birds. So I just talked about how wild turkeys are doing great, but in Tennessee and the southeastern U.S., wild turkeys appear to be decreasing based on anecdotal evidence, harvesting records from hunters, and on studies too. It's estimated that wild turkey hens must produce at least 2 poults or turkeylings a fall in order for a stable population. However, in 2020, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Tennessee reported between 1.3 and 1.7 poults per hen per fall. So that means that they are below the needed number for a stable population. One reason for the decline is invasive species. Some are obvious, like cats, coyotes, and feral pigs, who easily can prey upon ground nesting turkeys and flightless turkeylings. But one less obvious invasive species is the armadillo. I had no idea that the armadillo, specifically the 9-banded armadillo, was an invasive species, but apparently historically it was not found north of Mexico. In the past 130 years, its range has now spread across the American Southeast, where they can be really problematic for ground nesting bird species and also turtles due to their fondness for eggs. Their spread is partially humans' fault. Alterations in the landscape around the Rio Grande allowed them to make the jump over the border from Mexico. And also, they were novelty pets that were then released or escaped into the wild. Their spread may also have been inevitable too. The 9-banded armadillo's ancestral roots are in South America, but ever since the closing of the Panama Isthmus around 3 million years ago, they've been steadily spreading north. Turkey nests are heavily preyed upon in general, even without invasive species adding to the problem. Based on multiple studies done in the southeast U.S., nest survival rate hovers around 25%. In Tennessee in 2023, out of 49 nests researched, only 17% survived. Idaho, for some reason, might be doing better with their turkeys. Based on radio tag turkey studies from the 1990s, Idaho had a turkey nest survival rate of 42%. The full list of nest predators on turkeys is a mile long, but as far as their native ones, it's foxes, raccoons, and skunks, and coyotes where they're native in the range out west. Adult turkeys are less prone to predation than eggs and poults, but still get snagged by the occasional coyote, bobcat, and cougar. The average lifespan of a wild turkey is around 3 to 4 years. Toms appear to have shorter lifespans than hens, likely due to their conspicuous gobbling and displaying that attracts predators, human and non-human. It's rare to find a wild tom older than 5 years old or a hen older than 8 years old. However, in 1992 in Massachusetts, a banded wild tom was found that was 15 years old. That must have been one smart turkey to survive that long. And he probably died of old age too, because 15 years seems to be the upper limit of age that even pet domestic turkeys live to. There are a bunch of diseases that can affect turkeys, both wild and domestic, but domestic, we see way more of disease in. A major cause of disease of farm-raised turkeys is respiratory viruses and bacteria. Apparently, it's less the lungs that are affected in these diseases and more so the sinus cavity of the turkey. We've all heard of bird flu before, but actually the biggest killer of farm-raised turkeys appears to be bacterial sinusitis, basically a sinus infection, caused by a species of mycoplasma bacteria. mycoplasma. It causes like ear infections in humans and also atypical pneumonias. Anyone remember the H5N2 bird flu of 2014? After the coronavirus epidemic, bird flu, this seems like that was nothing. But anyway, it was a big deal at the time, and it especially affected a lot of poultry farms. Domestic turkeys were heavily affected by that respiratory virus, although the good news is that based on surveillance of wild turkeys performed in Minnesota during the outbreak, no wild turkeys were found to have contracted the virus. There's also a pretty crazy disease called lymphoproliferative disease virus, which is sort of like the HIV of turkeys. It's a retrovirus that attacks the lymphatic tissue and causes tumors. It appears this disease started in domestic turkeys in the Middle East, but then spilled over to wild populations in the US. It's not as devastating as HIV. Infected individuals appear to have a 10% mortality rate, but infection does result in reduced fitness, such as smaller brood sizes. There's also another virus called reticuloendotheliosis, or REV, which causes tumors in turkeys. Again, this virus started in domestic individuals and spread to wild turkey populations. This virus is particularly concerning because wild turkeys appear to be able to spread it to other birds, domestic and wild. These viruses raise a major concern for the spillover effect that our animal husbandry practices have on deadly diseases for humans and wild animals alike. Wild turkeys seem pretty prone to intestinal parasites. Since they feed a lot by pecking things up off the ground, they're easily exposed to parasite eggs and soil contaminated by animal poop. In studies I read detailing wild turkey intestinal parasites, every bird studied had some level of parasitic infection, although rarely was the burden of parasites so high as to cause any clinical significance to the bird's health. The parasites seem to even have their own niches within the turkey's gut biome. I read a study that looked at the parasites of Gould's turkey, a subspecies that inhabits the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains of Mexico, and found that cestodes were found in the small intestines while nematodes were found in the large intestine. There's an intestinal protozoa called Histomonas that causes a disease called blackhead disease in turkeys and other poultry and can be problematic for both wild and domestic turkeys. While other birds can be infected by it, they usually aren't severely affected. Turkeys, however, are super susceptible to blackhead disease, and it's advised farmers keep turkeys separated from other poultry species like chickens because of this. Chewing lice are also a problem for domesticated turkeys, both because they suck the turkey's blood and are distressing and can be vectors for disease like fowl cholera, toxoplasmosis, and typhoid. Remember those two-paired cecum I mentioned earlier when talking about turkey intestines? Well, they actually contain special immune tissue called cecal tonsils to help them fight infections that attempt to enter through their guts. That's right, turkey tonsils are in their intestines. The timing of hunting season may also be impacting turkey reproduction. Ideally, male turkeys are harvested after they've had enough time to breed with as many females as possible and for those females to start their nests, but still early enough that the hormones are flowing and those male turkeys are going to respond to a turkey call, so hunters will be able to, call them in and hunt them. And, while this has been proposed, like maybe we're hunting turkeys too early, let's, push the turkey season back a little bit. A 2023 study out of Tennessee that looked at survival after 2-week delays of the regular hunting season found no increase in turkey survival. So right now it's just theory. Habitat loss, as I mentioned in the breeding section, is another cause of turkey decline. When nesting, turkeys need plants that are large enough to conceal the nest, but not so large that the mom can't spot predators. This type of habitat is termed early successional vegetation. And early successional, this means that, forest has kind of been cleared, but is allowed to go a little bit wild. In pre-colonial times, it was probably more caused by wildfires or landslides or hurricanes, things like that. So they need habitat like this, and wildfire suppression could potentially be contributing to loss of it. Since turkeys readily feed on agricultural grain and seed, they can be exposed to insecticides that those seeds or crops are treated with. A study performed in Ontario found half of wild turkeys sampled had detectable levels of industrial pesticides in their liver. This isn't just bad for the turkeys. Remember, these birds are hunted and consumed by humans. So while you may think, your wild harvested turkey is as natural and organic as you can get, you may be unwittingly consuming harmful chemicals. A journal out of the University of Pennsylvania in 2005 linked multiple cases of turkey deaths throughout the state were from the turkeys consuming zinc phosphidine, which is a chemical used in rodent bait and often used in orchards and on farms as a roticide. So, just got to be careful with the chemicals we're putting out there in the environment. To summarize that, overall turkeys are doing pretty good. There are some threats, and, if you're a bird watcher who likes birds, or you're a hunter who likes hunting turkeys, definitely consider these causes, because they could, cause a decline in this very important and awesome bird. All right, folks, gobble, gobble. Thanks for hanging in there for this awesome Thanksgiving episode. We are reaching the end here. We are going to talk about turkey evolution. How did these incredible birds form? Turkeys are in the order Galliformes that contains ground birds like quail, pheasants, and chickens. In fact, I talk about the evolutionary history of this order some in my chicken episode, and I also think in my grouse episode too, which was like my third episode, I think. So I won't go into a ton of detail about it. Check those episodes out. But the Galliformes order has its roots as far back as 85 million years ago in the Cretaceous period with the dinosaurs, but really becomes some more of the recognizable families that we see today around 45 million years ago. Turkeys are part of the family Phasianidae that contains quail, chickens, and guinea fowl. And I hate to bring it back up, but oh my God, I said I wasn't going to, but remember that erectile snood? You can't escape it, can you? It appears that the ability to have erectile fleshy appendages was an ancestral state for this clade, as it's found in multiple species in this family, but not in other Galliformes. Turkeys specifically belong to this subfamily called Meleagrinidae, and this diverged from Gallus, the genus that contains chickens, around 33.6 million years ago. However, at this time, the genus Meleagris, as we recognize it today, didn't really exist. It was more of a proto-grouse, turkey, pheasant bird ancestor. And as I mentioned in my chicken episode, a lot of the early evolutionary history of, this family likely occurred in Eurasia. The turkey's closest relatives, ptarmigans, grouse, and pheasants, likely had multiple colonization events to the Americas via the Bering Strait. The evolutionary history of these ground-dwelling birds gets really messy because it also appears there was some back-and-forth movement between the Americas and Asia. However, it appears the tribe Tetranydae, that contains birds like the ruffed grouse, sage grouse, and ptarmigans, are the most closely related to Meleagris with the turkey. Likely somewhere around 23 to 28 million years ago, the first proto-grouse turkey ancestors made it over to America. We know this because of a right ankle bone fossil called Regminornis calabates, which was found in Bell, Florida, dating from the Miocene, and suggesting a ground-dwelling bird that was an in-between of a grouse and a turkey, and much smaller in body size than modern turkeys. In fact, the large body size of today's turkey seems to be more of a modern evolutionary trait. The first true turkey, the now extinct Proagriocoursis kimbalensis, doesn't pop up in the fossil record until about 6 million years ago in Nebraska, and has a small body size. The turkey subfamily Meleagrinidae was likely much more diverse than it is today, with the genus Meleagris now only containing 2 species, the American or northern turkey, which has been the subject of our show, and the occidental turkey, which is a cool turkey with a more peacock-like plumage that resides solely in the Yucatan Peninsula. The split between these 2 species occurred around 5.53 million years ago, right at the Miocene-Pliocene boundary, a period of warming temperatures. I should maybe do like a short episode just on that occidental turkey and its evolution. Like I was reading about, the Yucatan Peninsula during this period, and it was crazy how it formed. There was periods where it was flooded and then it receded and everything. Like maybe the occidental turkey formed as an island species initially. So I don't know. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. During these past few million years, though, it wasn't just the American and Occidental turkey strutting around. There were several other now extinct turkey species, including the California turkey, which is a common fossil in the La Brea tar pits, and it was shorter and stockier than the American turkey. It's estimated to have gone extinct around 10,000 years ago, coinciding with human habitation of its habitat in Southern California. All modern domestic turkey breeds appear to be descended from domesticated turkeys raised in Central America and then imported to Europe by Spanish conquistadors. Remember how earlier I said there were two haplotypes of that first domesticated turkey by the Pueblo people, and there might have been like two domestication events? Well, one, termed H1, appears to have been the main domesticated turkey. Its lineage shows low genetic variability, indicating its breeding was intensively controlled by humans. The other haplotype, H2, has more genetic variability, leading to the suggestion that it was more of a free-range domestic breed. The H2 did breed with the H1 haplotype, and in fact, that's the only reason we know the H1 haplotype exists, because the H1 is now extinct. It appears that the H2 was the breed that was taken by conquistadors to Europe, and from what all modern domestic breeds come from. So it's kind of ironic that today's domestic turkeys are all from a more free-range turkey in Mexico, rather than the one that was more intensively cultivated in pens and stuff like that. Maybe that's just the only ones that the conquistadors were able to grab and steal, was the free-range ones, and the Native Americans like, nah, you're not touching our good turkeys that we got. In addition to the domestic breeds, there are several wild subspecies of turkey, like Gould's turkey that we talked about earlier. There's a total of 6 recognized subspecies, counting the domesticated turkey, most differentiating based on feather color or iridescence differences in their feathers, size differences, or leg color differences. There's a subspecies termed Osceola, confined entirely to the Florida Panhandle. It's actually a really cool subspecies name because Osceola, it's named after the famous Seminole chief Osceola. There's Merriam's turkey, which is a ponderosa pine forest specialist found in Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. I love ponderosa pines, smell like vanilla. Some of their modern populations are due to intentional reintroduction programs by the Fish and Wildlife Service. There's also a Rio Grande turkey subspecies. There's the eastern U.S. subspecies, which is the one we talked about earlier that is in decline. It has a subspecies named Sylvestris, Silva being Latin for tree, since they rely heavily on forested landscapes more than the other species do. These subspecies formed within the past 2.5 million years during the Pleistocene. Genetic analysis shows that Mexican turkey subspecies Gould's turkey forms the base of the American turkey tree and dates back to about 3.35 million years ago. Therefore, the roots of turkeys likely lie in Mexico, where the ancestral turkey split off from the Occidental turkey, the Yucatan specialist I talked about earlier, around 5 million years ago. Then, over the next 3 million years, the American turkey spread out of Mexico, making its way both north into the American Northwest, and really spread all over the eastern U.S. and up into Canada. The deserts of the U.S. and Mexico, such as the Sonora, Mojave, and Chihuahuan, acted as natural barriers to turkeys, and when spreading, they avoided them. This resulted in a sort of weird, whirl pattern, like a clockwise spiral pattern of turkey spread. Where the Rio Grande subspecies is actually much more closely related to the Sylvestris or the eastern U.S. Turkey than it is to the Mexican turkeys, even though you'd think, the Rio Grande is right there next to Mexico. But, this is because when spreading out of Mexico, the turkeys had to avoid the desert, so they sort of avoided that whole, eastern part of Texas, Mexico, spread up California into the north and then kind of spread across to the east and spread across the eastern U.S. And then from the eastern U.S., they started making their way down to the Rio Grande. The spread of turkeys was not an unstoppable march. There is evidence that a population decrease occurred around 10,000 years ago, particularly with the eastern populations of turkeys who appeared to have experienced significant bottlenecking, a phenomenon where a population is reduced to just a few individuals before re-expanding again. Around 10,000 years ago coincides with a period called the Younger Dryas. This is a fascinating time in climate history because it was a sudden glacial epoch, reversing the overall trend of glacial recession and warming climate as the Pleistocene shifted to the Holocene. These few thousand years of glaciation are a possible reason for the extinction of the North American megafauna, such as the giant ground sloth, the woolly rhinos, and the mammoths. Turkeys don't like glaciers, and remember, they can't survive with greater than 30 centimeters of snow on the ground, so their populations, especially in North America, became severely reduced. The other crazy thing about the Younger Dryas is it ended just as suddenly as it began. When temperatures began to warm again, they did so incredibly fast. There's evidence that at the end of the Younger Dryas, temperatures in Greenland rose by 18 degrees Fahrenheit in just a decade. Well, y'all, that's all I got on turkeys. I hope you got some good facts to tell Uncle Barney at the dinner table. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please let me know your bird watch. Send in some voice memos. Let me know if you want free stickers. There's the website with t-shirts if you're so inclined. Thank you all for listening. I really enjoy doing this podcast, and I appreciate you all letting me know your bird recommendations. And as always, stay dirty, fellow birdies. Dirty Bird Podcast is brought to you by me, John, with my rotating panel of guests and co-hosts. Thanks for being on the show, everybody. The Dirty Bird theme song is by Ricky Pistone. Check out his groovy and hilarious music videos on YouTube. The outro music you're listening to right now is a song New York Redneck by the Sidewalk Slammers. Check them out wherever you get your music. The Dirty Bird Podcast logo is by the very talented TJ Ranoski. And of course, a shout out to my beautiful wife, Lauren, who created my original logo. Check out the show notes for this episode for a full list of credits for any bird calls or sounds used in the episode. Thanks for listening.
At the track, drive into Brooklyn, ain't never coming back. Tim's on the ground in the concrete jungle. I might get into a little wrong.